What the Room Requires by Alydia Rackham. Chapter 3. Draco. I heard her following me. Fine. My hand still stung, however invisibly, with the bites of several snakes. I rolled my eyes as I passed between the gray trees, the pine needles crunching beneath my feet. I should have let her get filled with the venom and die, except she probably couldn't actually die, so she would have just screamed into my concentration as I tried to find a way out. Yes, it was better that I pulled her out of there. She was quieter. That's what I told myself. I rubbed my hands and grimaced. My hands still hurt, though. "Do you recognize this door?" she said from right behind me. "Do you constantly ask questions?" I sighed. "How else can I learn anything?" "I don't know, maybe by listening for once in your life," I shot back. "I'm trying to listen," she said, "to your answer." "No, I don't recognize the door." "I think I do," she said. I jerked to a stop and looked at her. She walked past me, her gaze fixed on the door. "You do?" She did not answer. Her footsteps slowed as she approached the door, and she stretched out her hand and grasped the doorknob. "How do you recognize it?" I asked. She said nothing, just stood there. "Oh, I see. As soon as I ask you a question, you stop talking. I suppose—" She turned the knob. Bright morning light spilled through the gap. I flinched and held up a hand to shield my eyes. Hermione drew in a slow breath. "It is?" she whispered, pushing the door aside, and stepped into a bedroom. "Granger?" I frowned, then followed her. I was instantly hit with a fresh floral smell. I had to blink to get my eyes to adjust. Hermione now stood at the foot of a quilt-covered bed. The walls were white. There was a tall, paned window with a seat to the left, hung with purple-patterned curtains. Straight ahead hung a huge bulletin board covered with pictures, newspaper clippings, and flowery notes. Beside that, on the window wall, hung framed pictures of pansies and other flowers. On the floor, following the wall, about thigh-high, stood bookshelves, absolutely packed with books, but very neat. In the far corner, atop another pile of books, sat a little stuffed animal. The room was littered with all sorts of other girly odds and ends, lamps and boxes and knickknacks. I frowned at the pictures. They creeped me out. They didn't move. Hermione hurried across the carpet, took hold of the little stuffed animal and pulled it to her chest. When she turned around, a surprised smile flashed across her face. "This is my room!" I panicked. I spun around, snatched at the doorknob I had just shut, yanked the door open to dive back through, and blundered right into a dozen hanging dresses. "What the? Did we come through your closet?" I cried, battering at the dresses and turning back around. She gaped at me. "I don't have parasites or the plague or anything, Malfoy," she cried. "I know that," I growled, unable to keep the uneasy expression from my face. "It's just—" I waved a hand at the bed. "I'm in a—" "What?" She lifted her chin. "A muggle's room?" I took my hand off the doorknob and straightened. "No," I said. "A girl's room." Her eyebrows shot up. Her mouth worked for a moment, and then she laughed at me. "Oh, well, ha!" She shook her head, but the smile didn't go away. "What?" I objected, blushing. "Nothing. She paused. Her face grew more serious. She frowned at her walls. "How did we get here? I'm fairly sure I wasn't thinking about my room." "Well, it isn't the way out, and now the forest has turned into a closet." I gestured back at it. Hermione gazed at her wardrobe, then gave it a thoughtful look. She stepped toward it and past me. I got out of her way. She cocked her head and touched one of the dresses. "Like the door to Narnia," she murmured. My mouth fell open. "Granger, how in blazing do you know about—" "Sweetheart, the tea's ready." I jumped. Hermione turned to face the opposite door. "Mum?" she yelped. "Yes." "Mum?" she gasped. tossed the stuffed animal down on the bed, and raced to the door. "Granger, this isn't—" "Granger, don't be a fool," I tried, then hurried after her. The next moment I found myself in a tiny sitting room. Sparse walls, a cloth couch in front of a strange box with a moving, talking picture in the front of it, another chair, a piano, and two people standing up on the other side of the couch. One was a thin, fair-haired man with a sweater vest and pale trousers. The other was a plainly dressed, dark-haired woman who had her arms wrapped tight around Hermione. "Mum!" Hermione said again, squeezing her eyes shut and pressing her face against the woman's sweater. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" the woman cried, laughing, but her pretty face showed concern. I stood there by the piano, feeling more awkward than I ever have. The man, Hermione's father, caught sight of me. "Who's this?" he asked. Hermione turned her head, but did not let go of her mum. "Oh, this is Draco Malfoy from school." "Draco Malfoy?" her mum repeated, looking at her. Then her dark eyes met mine. "The boy who called you that name?" Hermione cleared her throat, then gave me a strange look. I swallowed. "Mr. Malfoy." The Muggle man stepped toward me, smoothing his consternation with a half-smile. "Pleasure to meet you." He stuck his hand out to me. I shot a trapped glance at Hermione, then raised my head and gripped his hand for an instant, then let it go. I resisted the urge to wipe my palm off on my trouser leg. Hermione glared at me. "What are you doing home?" Mrs. Granger asked her, backing up and taking her by the shoulders. "Well, we..." Hermione looked at me again, and now I saw a change in her eyes. I wanted to roll mine. She had already forgotten where we were. "We got sort of lost," she tried, "and we were looking for..." The front door blew in. The concussion shook my bones. Glass rained into the sitting room. I jumped back 5 feet. Hermione and her mom screamed, then threw their arms around each other. Mr. Granger grabbed them. My heart leaped into my throat. Outside, day turned to night like the flip of a switch. The door toppled onto the floor. The remaining glass in the panes shattered. "Get down!" Mr. Granger commanded, throwing his wife and daughter to the floor. I dove behind the end of the couch, slapping my hand to my pocket. I swore. Idiot. I didn't have my wand. "Draco!" Hermione gasped. Her head was only a foot from mine. I couldn't see her for the darkness. "Shut up!" I ordered. I twisted and sat up, then peeked over the top of the couch. Lightning burst outside, thunder rolled, and 2 figures stood silhouetted in the doorway. Recognition flashed through me. My heart surged. Even on a Muggle threshold, in a house far too meager for their presence, I knew these people. My father, and my Aunt Bellatrix Lestrange. A hand grabbed mine. "Who is it?" Hermione hissed from her hiding place on the floor. I did not answer, and pulled my hand out of her grasp. I braced my feet underneath me so I could stand up and greet them. "Lumos!" My father waved his wand. White light illuminated the room. My father's visage, hard and cool, turned to face Mr. Granger. I smirked. What a contrast. There stood a bumbling, shivering, magicless, skinny peasant in front of my father, with his long white hair, magnificent, flowing black cloak, and ice-blue eyes. Aunt Bellatrix snaked in behind him, cocking her wild head to the side, twirling her wand in her right hand. "Come on, Lucius," she said lightly. "Let's get on with it." My father only minutely raised his eyebrow. Then, addressing a trembling Mr. Granger, "Where is your daughter?"